Today is May the 4th, so in honor of Star Wars Day, we're going to be talking, you guessed it, all things Star Wars, and we're going to be going into more detail on that right now. Hello everybody and welcome to my May the 4th special. That's right, it is May the 4th, otherwise known as Star Wars Day, where everyone posts all of the fun things from what they love about Star Wars, everything they've loved in the new Star Wars canon, all the new Star Wars news comes out, everything is on sale right now, for real. If you go to Steam right now, you can get just about any Star Wars game, and I'm fairly certain there's a bundle on Steam where you can buy every single Star Wars game for $100. That's how it was last year, I'm not sure about this year, but check it out, you won't be disappointed. But we're not here to talk about video games today. That could be a video for another time, but today I figured since it is May the 4th, and you know, it's Star Wars Day, we gotta talk all things Star Wars, I figured I would go over something that I haven't ever actually gotten to cover before. That's why for this May the 4th special, I will be going over my favorite scenes from each Star Wars movie, going from 1 through 9, including Solo and Rogue One. So for each movie, we'll be going over my favorite scenes and why that particular scene is my favorite, and hopefully by the time this video is over, you'll get a better understanding of why I love Star Wars. So let's kick off this May the 4th special strong by starting with everyone's favorite movie, The Phantom Menace. It's a joke, I know people don't like the prequels. Anyway, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So when The Phantom Menace came out in 1999, there was a lot of fans that enjoyed the movie, and a good majority of them that thought it was the worst thing ever created and that it should be destroyed immediately. You know, to each their own. If you like it, you do, and if you don't, that's fine too, I guess. But I personally love the movie. It was the first Star Wars movie I ever saw, and I grew up with it when my mom brought home the VHS tape in, I think it was 2000 when it came out in April. I still have that VHS tape. It's somewhere I need to find it. But my favorite scene from this movie, it was kind of hard to narrow it down because there are a lot of scenes from this movie I really like, but I think the one scene I like the most is when we are introduced to Jar Jar Binks. I'm totally kidding, that's a joke. Please don't click off of this video. No, in all honesty, I think my favorite scene from this movie is pretty much similar to everyone else's favorite scene, as that is the first full reveal we get of Darth Maul. Yes, we do see him fight Qui-Gon in Tatooine for a little bit, but we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him. So it's when those sliding doors open up in the Naboo hangar and he just throws his hood back and you see the horns on his head, you're like, this guy means business. And then everyone got real excited when he takes that lightsaber out, puts it in front of him, and you see two blades, because we only see the one in the fight in Tatooine. So when we finally see both blades ignite, the first time seeing a double-bladed lightsaber on screen, everyone loses their minds. It's a great time, and the battle that follows is also fantastic. Ray Park, who played the physical role of Darth Maul, absolute genius, absolute fan of the series, and loves doing everything for the fans, which just makes me love that scene even more. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now I understand this is one of the movies that is brutally hated by a majority of the fan base, a good 99% I would assume, and it's also not really my favorite film. While I would put it at the bottom of the films if I was ranking it from best to worst, I still enjoy it for a few reasons, and the one thing is my most favorite scene, which is the chase through Coruscant. So while we were fully introduced to Coruscant in The Phantom Menace, that was the one thing I loved from that movie, is that seeing this whole planet that was entirely made of one giant city. The concept was cool, the way it looks from space was amazing, and seeing it in a more broader spectrum in this chase scene when Anakin and Obi-Wan are chasing after Zam Wesell after the attempt on Padme's life, you just get to see a whole different side of the city, from the low ground dudgy areas to some of the factory areas. And one of the things I loved about it is that all of these neon lights showing up everywhere. It kind of looks like Tokyo at night in some points. There's all these neon flashing signs and there's a lot of color, and that's one of the things that really draws me to Attack of the Clones. While it's not a great movie by any means, I understand that, but one of the things I really love about the film, and the reason it becomes somewhat of a guilty pleasure film in some ways, is the aesthetic appeal of all of the use of color saturation in this film. Well, sure, the dialogue might not be the best and the acting is subpar at times. There's a lot of points where the colors on screen are just really popping out, especially during the chase on Coruscant because it's in the middle of the night, so you see everything lighting up and glowing, and again during the fight with Count Dooku when Anakin cuts the power cable and the lights go out and all you see are the colored blades of the lightsabers. It's just a great use of saturated color, and it gets me every time. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. What's quite possibly one of my favorite Star Wars films of all time. It goes back and forth between that and The Empire Strikes Back, as I imagine it should. It's one of the biggest turning points in the Star Wars franchise, and it's one of the things that I absolutely loved about it, is that seeing that transformation from Anakin to Darth Vader, which is my favorite scene. The very end of the movie, going from Padme's funeral to the creation of Darth Vader to seeing the beginnings of the Death Star being built out in empty space. It just ties the whole thing together, and when I saw it for the first time in pay-per-view probably in 2006, I think by this point, but I sat there on the edge of my parents' bed, watched that movie without even blinking for the most part, and when we got to that final scene where the helmet dropped on Darth Vader and you hear him breathe for the first time, I thought you could have ended the movie there and I would have been perfectly happy for it. But of course, there is still a little bit more. You do have Padme's funeral, which definitely cried there. You see Darth Vader come up and become the full form. You see the Death Star being built, and then that very last scene with the twin sunsets on Tatooine. Seeing Obi-Wan turn into Ben Kenobi and give Luke over to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Oh, chills every time I think about it. And it was such an amazing way to close out the prequel trilogy, tying it into A New Hope. Love it every time. Solo, a Star Wars story. And if you haven't figured it out by now, yes, we are going in chronological order as far as how the movies tie themselves together, not by release date. Putting this movie out just 5 months after The Last Jedi was a catastrophe, and no one should have ever thought that was a good idea. Because of that, it suffered traumatically at the box office, also including some of the backlash from The Last Jedi. It was a little rough, but at the end of the day, Solo, a Star Wars story is an extremely fun film. That's all it is. It's a fun heist movie with a lot of good moments and a lot of fun. It doesn't have a lot of weight to it because it doesn't have to. It's just a fun movie to watch. And while there are some fantastic moments throughout this film, my most favorite scene is the chase through the Maw cluster. When they're coming straight out from Kessel and the first thing they see is that Star Destroyer just barreling towards them, they're like, oh, it's fine, they won't pay attention to us, and then suddenly, TIE fighter, TIE fighter, TIE fighter. It's fantastic. That whole chase scene through the Maw with the use of some of the original score rescored for this film just adds to the nostalgia factor as they're flying away from TIE fighters in this really sleek, upgraded looking Millennium Falcon. It's wonderful. And then that little drift scene he does that he says he learned from his buddy Needles until he crashed doing this exact same thing, drops the landing gear, drifts the Millennium Falcon. At first I thought that Rey was the only person to drift in the Millennium Falcon in that small scene you get in The Force Awakens. I was wrong. It was Han Solo. He was the first person to ever drift in the Millennium Falcon. And in the process, you end up killing a TIE pilot. I mean, hey, what's not to love out of that? Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So I remember when I was seeing Rogue One in theaters, I didn't really know what to expect from this movie and how close it would actually get to A New Hope by the time the movie ended. I know it's supposed to end, you get the plans from the Death Star from Scarif, you give it to the Rebel fleet, they get away. We didn't really know how far it was going to go, but I really did not know that it was going to end about 15 minutes before the beginning of A New Hope, which is exactly what my favorite scene is, going directly toward the end with a scene that was actually reshot in the movie. This was not originally in the movie, but it's when you see Vader's blade light up at the very end of the movie and he just goes on a killing spree down that corridor with all of the Rebel troopers in the blockade runner. It's absolutely terrifying. And yes, I know he's not technically in the blockade runner yet, but you do see that a little bit later, so you gotta cut me some slack there. The reason I love this scene so much is not so much that it shows off how badass Vader is, but just the fact that, you know, for the most part, I didn't really like Vader all of that much like everyone else did. Don't get me wrong, he's a fantastic character, and I do enjoy him as a Sith Lord. It's just, I never really felt a whole lot of weight to the character. And then when I saw this scene in Rogue One, I was actually terrified of him while watching this in the theater because he was on a mission. He needs to get these plans back. He knows what's at stake, which just ends up adding so much more weight to the opening scenes of A New Hope when he's choking out Captain Antilles and he's asking him, where are the plans you've intercepted? What have you done with those plans? And then he just throws his dead body up against the wall like it's nothing. It makes that scene much more terrifying. So what Rogue One brought to A New Hope overall is fantastic. And that ending scene of them just getting away and the blockade runner zapping away in space, hands down, my favorite scene. Episode 4, A New Hope. Now we're getting into the good old classic, the original trilogy. Everyone loves these. There's not a problem with any of these films, and you can't tell me otherwise. My favorite scene in A New Hope is when we are introduced to the Millennium Falcon in the Mos Eisley Spaceport in Docking Bay 94. As much as the cast and characters that appear in A New Hope are all fantastic and damn near flawless at times, nothing compares to the showing of the Millennium Falcon, since it in itself is also a character of the movie. So being able to see it sit there in all its glory, even though Luke calls it a piece of junk,
what a piece of junk!
And then seeing the action of it taking off, blasting out of Mos Eisley, coming across 2 Imperial Star Destroyers, then jumping to hyperspace, just going inside the Millennium Falcon, seeing the cockpit for the first time, seeing the gun turrets on both the top and bottom of the ship, the holochess board that we have in the center, and the floating droid that Luke uses to practice his lightsaber skills. Seeing all of that for the first time took my breath away, and of course the little smuggling codes that they hide themselves in when they go into the Death Star. The ship's just full of all kinds of surprises and secrets, and there's so much room for activities. Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Quite possibly the best Star Wars film of all time, and I would probably say that it is the best Star Wars film of all time. The Empire Strikes Back was a phenomenal sequel to A New Hope when that came out in 1980, and there's never a time where I don't want to watch The Empire Strikes Back, and getting one of my favorite scenes out of this movie was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and I had to narrow it down, and it came up to what I think everyone else's favorite is. So there's 3 scenes that could potentially be your favorites in The Empire Strikes Back, and this kind of goes across the board. It's either the Battle of Hoth, the asteroid chase, or the duel in Cloud City. And of course, my favorite is the duel in Cloud City. Seeing Luke face off against Darth Vader for the first time is a very pivotal point in the story, and it just shows the differences between both of them. Seeing how scared Luke is, but willing to try to fight back and show how confident he is in his skills after, like 5 hours of Jedi training. But one of the reasons I love this fight so much is it's very raw and gritty. There's not a lot of technique to it. It is just raw strength of going back and forth with the sabers, clashing, just hoping to get one blow that will end the fight. And of course, all of the different locations they go throughout Cloud City during this fight, from the carbonite chamber down those dark hallways when Luke flies out that window, and then of course when he loses his hand out on the pier. I believe it's one of the longest lightsaber fights that we ever saw on screen, and no part of it is boring. Everything about it is very tense and exciting and scary. Everything I love out of a fight, and definitely my favorite scene. Of course, when it comes to The Empire Strikes Back, an argument can be made for this scene here.
Sir, if I may venture an opinion.
I'm not really interested in your opinion, 3PO.
But I will leave that up to your interpretation on which one of those scenes is actually my favorite. Episode 6. Return of the Jedi. As much as the second fight between Luke and Vader in Return of the Jedi is another favorite for a lot of people, my favorite scene, quite differently, is actually the very end of the movie. And I know you might be thinking, wow, the whole movie was great, why is the ending your favorite? Really because when I first saw Return of the Jedi, I saw one of the updated versions with all of the new CGI stuff. And while I did not care for the added CGI Sarlacc all that much or any of the other CGI stuff that they put in, one of my favorite scenes is actually the ending after they changed the ending song. They got rid of the Ewok celebration song and just added that new victory song, and it just added a whole level of completion to the side. Sure, the original song is fun and everyone's happy, it's the end of the movie, but the add of pride and enjoyment and fulfillment that came out of the new song that was added at the end of the movie just added for what I feel is a perfect ending. Just the last few notes at the very end, right before it cuts to the credits, it's just like a moment of pure bliss and relaxation. And it just sometimes it'll bring a tear to my eye just because it's just like, yes, this is it. This is a perfect ending. And it's just one of the things that I will always cherish about Return of the Jedi. Episode 7. The Force Awakens. I knew this was coming. We're getting into the sequel trilogy. If you don't like it, please save your comments for someone else's video. I enjoy them and I don't want to argue about it. Now, I appreciate everything that J.J. Abrams did when he brought in The Force Awakens. Even at some points, yes, it is a carbon copy of A New Hope, but there's so much more added to this that I really enjoyed, especially the assault on Starkiller Base. My favorite scene. And of course the scene is cool enough as it is, seeing all of the new X-Wings fight against all of the new TIE fighters. It's a fantastic look, but it's really the way it was directed and the way the whole scene was put together. The technical side of it is what makes the scene my favorite. There's a lot of technical stuff to this. There's one scene where you have a turret that's shooting at an X-Wing and then it zooms out really fast to see the rest of the battle going on. You get POVs from the X-Wings when they're flying around. You got rockets flying past them. And there's another really cool POV position they do that I think was new for this movie, where it's like they put the camera on the S-foil of the X-Wing, so you can see it when the wings are like moving like this, and then they're all moving directly down towards the oscillator on Starkiller Base. And it's just a fantastic way to shoot the scene, and the whole thing was just colored beautifully. Everything about that scene, in my opinion, is perfection. From blowing it up to getting out of there, the whole planet imploding on itself, it's a just wonderful scene. Episode 8. The Last Jedi. Oh, I can already feel it coming. Everyone's talking about how much they hate Rian Johnson and that he ruined Star Wars again. I don't want to hear it. La 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 la. I enjoy The Last Jedi. I'm sorry, I do. And if that didn't make you angry, you're definitely not going to like what my favorite scene is, because my favorite scene from The Last Jedi is Luke's final moments. Now, this was a really hard one to pick, but when I thought about it, this was the reason it was my favorite. Obviously, it opens up, we meet Luke Skywalker, and it is not the Luke Skywalker we knew from Return of the Jedi. We were all hoping for an all-powerful Jedi Master with an entire academy. If you enjoy that stuff, read the new Jedi Order. You'll get all of that you want. This was not the case. So when it came down to the final fight on Crate, and Luke used the Force for the first time in quite some time to project himself as a Force vision in front of Kylo Ren to stop the First Order from crushing the resistance there in the base on Crate, It's a fantastic scene, showing that he can just bamboozle Kylo Ren like that to make sure everyone can get out safely, no one gets away, but of course it does use all of his strength, and he feels he has fulfilled his purpose in giving Rey what she needs to become the next Jedi, to keep the Jedi from not falling apart. And of course, once he passes and becomes one with the Force, I broke down in the theater. My friend Brian, who's sitting next to me, broke down in the theater. The rest of the theater broke down with me. It's a very strong emotional moment, and I will always cherish what that scene means to me. Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And of course, yes, I am going to say that The Rise of Skywalker is by no means a perfect film. It's got a lot of plot holes, and I'm just going to ignore it and pretend like everything's okay. And my favorite scene from the final Star Wars film is when Rey is rummaging through the remains of the Death Star 2. But I just love this scene. Seeing her go through the Death Star is basically what she does. You know, she's a scavenger. We first see her rummaging through a Star Destroyer on Jakku, and now we see her going through the Death Star. It's just kind of like a poetic justice kind of thing. And seeing all of the remains, there's old TIE fighters, there's a Lambda shuttle, and all the empty Stormtrooper buckets, it's kind of freaky, because I don't know if there's like people that are still wearing those suits, or they just happen to be empty Stormtrooper gear just lying around, but it's really eerie and really freaky. And then when she gets to the throne room from the final fight we saw in Return of the Jedi, a wave of nostalgia hits you, and it's just really creepy to see that some of that stuff survived the blast. It's like it was such a powerful presence of evil in that room that it somehow managed to contain itself after the blast went off, destroying the Death Star. So seeing it still kind of sit there, not necessarily intact, but most of the room is still standing, it's really creepy. And there you have it. That is my list of all of my favorite scenes from every Star Wars movie there's ever been. You could ask, what about the Clone Wars movie? But no, that movie is terrible. And of course, there are a lot of runner-ups and a lot of honorable mentions that I could go into, but that would be way too long, and it would definitely have to be another video. But what are your favorite scenes? Let me know in the comments down below. I guarantee some of my favorite scenes have to align with yours, or maybe I'm off by a little bit. Maybe you like the scene just before my favorite scene, or the scene that follows it. But let me know in the comments down below. I'd really like to know. Also, let me know what you're planning to do to celebrate Star Wars Day this May the 4th. Are you going to be watching the movies? Are you going to be hanging out with the family? What are you going to be doing? Let me know. But I guess until next year, that is going to be it for my May the 4th special. Remember, if you like what you saw, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to see more Star Wars videos of any kind, or if you'd like to see anything else. But until then, and as always, I will see you guys next time, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.